Do you have an independent mind? If so, I hope you'll subscribe to my YouTube channel. Just click on the subscribe button, ring that little bell, and stay up to date with my daily content. Thank you. I'm a big fan of Scott Galloway. He wears many hats. He is the host of the New York and Vox Media podcasts Pivot and the Professor G Show, where, by the way, I've had the privilege of being a guest. He is a business professor at NYU Stern School of Business, and he's the subject of a very detailed New York Magazine interview that's posted right now at smerconish.com and is in my Twitter feed. It is something that will appear in the print edition, already appears in the print edition of the April 12 edition of the magazine. Yes, they still print. Biden bucks is Beeple is Bitcoin. I'm not even sure I understand that. A lot of what Scott Galloway said in the New York Magazine piece was over my head, but something that he did say really struck a chord with me. Two things, actually, that I'll read in tandem. People under the age of 40 are fed up. They have less than half the economic security as measured by the ratio of wealth to income that their parents did at their age. Their share of overall wealth has crashed. A lot of them are bored. He also said, for the first time in our nation's history, a 30-year-old isn't doing as well as his or her parents were at 30, and that creates shame and rage. I hope he's wrong. I fear he's right. This is Scott Galloway. Thanks so much for being here, Scott. I really appreciate your time.
It's always good. I was going to say good. It's always great to be with Michael Smerconish.
So in an era where there's a lot to worry about, I'm really concerned. My wife and I have raised four, are still raising, I should say, will always be raising. But I really worry that what you say is true. We all want to see our kids outperform us in a variety of metrics, not the least of which is happiness. But make the case that these are really trying times for younger Americans.
Sure. So spring is supposed to be a time of nervousness and joy when people find out where they're going to college. And I'm getting emails everywhere saying my son or daughter played by the rules, did really well, did well on the test, got great grades, extracurricular activities, and applied to 5 colleges and got shut out. Where I went to college, UCLA, the acceptance rate was 60% when I applied. This year it'll be 9%. The percentage of young men and women under the age of 30 living at home, there are now more young men and women living at home than there are living on their own, and that's not a good thing. And then you look at purchasing power, it's declined by 60% in the last 30 years. So less money, less options, less opportunities for education. And so you have a great deal of shame and rage. It's embarrassing for the parents. It creates an unhealthy dynamic in homes. And it's also especially creating a very unhealthy dynamic among young men. And I think there's a link to these mass shootings, Michael. I think the most dangerous person on the planet is a young, bored, and broke male. So I think it's an existential threat, and I think it's a cause for huge, what I'll call, deaths of despair among younger Americans.
Were we already headed in this direction, and then what you're describing was compounded by COVID?
Yeah, COVID is just an accelerant. Every trend, its enduring feature won't be as a change agent, but as an accelerant. And more people, specifically young men, were moving in with their parents, but COVID accelerated that. We were having reductions in what I'll call the sort of enforcer of the caste system, admissions rates that elite universities got drunk on exclusivity, and me and my colleagues no longer see ourselves as public servants, but as luxury brands. And you also have a shareholder class that consistently sort of finds reasons to transfer wealth from a younger generation to an older generation. The only cohort that has lost ground over the last 30 years could loosely be described as the under 40 cohort, which, by the way, tends to be more people of color. For the first time, people under the age of 18, there's more non-whites than whites, tend to have more gender balance in terms of opportunity. So you could argue that it's both a war on the young, but also a war on people of color and a zeitgeist where women have more seats at the table. So this calls on everything, but if you were to say that there's a class warfare here, it would be the transfer of wealth from young to old. 1980, people under the age of 40 controlled 19% of the nation's wealth. They now control 9%.
You and I look at those acceptance rates by so-called elite institutions and we're horrified by it. And yet, I think, Scott, they wear it as a badge of honor.
Well, Michael, how many of us and our friends have bragged that I would never get into the college I attended to if I applied now? We all say that.
I'm that guy. Yes.
Well, and we can all relate to it. We've done it. And guess what? Be careful what you say, because that means your son's not getting in. And America, universities to a certain extent represent this new complexion in America where we have decided our goal as a society is to take the top 1% and turn them into billionaires. And our new role models are these exceptional individuals who become worth the GDP of hungry Elon Musk. Whereas America used to be about how do we take the bottom 90% and give them a shot at the top 10%. And that's what universities used to be. And I would argue that now universities, the elite universities, really serve two cohorts. And that is the children of wealthy. If you're from a top 1% income earning household, you're 77 times more likely to get into an elite university. There are 34 of the 100 top universities, including 5 Ivies, have more people from the top 1% income earning households than the bottom 60%. So we've decided that universities are for the wealthy or for what I'll call the freakishly remarkable. And that is a kid by the age of 17 has managed to climb out of a single parent household, build wells, get a patent. And I can prove to us, each of us, that 99% of our children are not in the top 1%. Whereas the university system used to be about taking good kids and giving them a shot at being great. It feels as if we've kind of fell out of love with the unremarkable. This year, Harvard had 54,000 applications. It'll let in 1,600 to fill a class of 14. It's 3.4%. And with the GDP of El Salvador on its balance sheet, the question becomes, well, why are you only admitting 1,400 people and not 14,000? So to a certain extent, higher education reflects this new what I'd call corrupt or strange goal in America, and that is a Hunger Games where a small group of people go on to live a remarkable life because they are remarkable, and everybody else kind of dies a slow death.
I know that it's very complicated and there are a lot of factors at play, but one of them, and I say this as a parent who's gone through the application process as a parent 4 times, this Common App, I think, is not a good thing because it allows families, frankly, like mine, to have a son or a daughter throw a long ball for Harvard, even if they aren't Harvard material, because what the hell, it's only $50 or $75, so go ahead and take a shot. Whereas if you really had to invest yourself in 4 or 5 applications, you wouldn't be applying to Harvard and be part of that, that declined rate.
Yeah, anytime there's what I'll call digital innovation in any sector, one key factor that happens is a concentration of power. And that is now every top university sort of sees every applicant. And by the notion that there's no regions, geographies come down, the power accretes to the best. So all of a sudden we have Harvard basically and Stanford and MIT get their pick of absolutely everybody, and the top have access. And there's some good news here. If you're an incredible young woman from the inner city, you can find Harvard and Harvard can find you. But the other 99% are left fighting over lesser and lesser schools, and the cartel of universities has created the perfect kind of economic ecosystem for universities where you have the elite universities reject 95% of their applicants, and there's a general feeling that if you haven't sent your kid to college, you failed as a parent. And the cartel pricing kicks in where Tier 2 schools are able to charge the same Ivy League prices. So what you end up with is an entire, millions of kids who end up at Tier 2 schools but end up paying the price of a Mercedes for a Hyundai education. And we all believe that there really isn't an on-ramp to our society unless you get that 4-year college degree. Also, the unintended consequences of doing away with tests because of COVID is that now more and more kids, applications to UC Berkeley are up 28%. Because if you bomb the SAT, you'd think, well, I just have no shot at Berkeley. But now there is no SAT. So more and more people are thinking, why not? I'm going to throw in an app. But you're absolutely right. The fact that so many people are applying to so many schools gives the top schools the chance to skim the cream of the crop. And because they aren't expanding their freshman seats faster than population growth, you end up with this trickle-down effect where we're getting worse and worse brands or certifications for the same price.
Is there any reason to believe that higher education will listen to Scott Galloway in some of the things that you've said, not the least of which is, hey, Harvard, you should take 14,000, not 1,400?
I was wrong. Last year, I thought that the elite universities would partner with big tech firms and take advantage of their excess demand to scale their offerings, garner more money, and open the gates. I was wrong. They have doubled down on exclusivity. They have no intention of increasing their admittance rates. They see themselves more as Hermes and Chanel than they do public servants. I do think there are a lot of state systems that haven't lost the script. Michigan, Florida, the University of California all take their missions very seriously, the University of Texas, and are trying their best to expand enrollment. 2/3 of kids end up at a public school. So if you really want to move the needle, if we're kind of moving to solutions, it would be figuring out a way to incorporate technology. If you just take 50% of your classes online, and the dirty secret of most professors is that half our courses could probably, or half our lessons could be taught online without a serious erosion in quality. But if you took just 50% of your classes online, you effectively double the capacity, and we could move around this artificial supply constraint of campuses and tenured faculty. The answer here is not only lower costs, but much greater admittance rates. So I would argue that there's a bifurcation between the public servants at elite universities who every day the administrators ask themselves one question over and over. How do I increase my compensation and lower my accountability? And I think that a lot of my colleagues have been infected with that, and they found that the best route to that is a luxury positioning. But then the public universities, the great state schools, I think have not lost the script and are trying to expand their enrollments and face this problem. So it depends on who we're talking about.
But what I hear you describe, if I'm understanding, would cause a great winnowing process. I mean, frankly, why shouldn't thousands of students be able to hear a lecture from someone like you, Scott Galloway, at the NYU Stern School of Business? Why keep that all bottled up when, by virtue of the internet, many could take advantage of listening to your wisdom? But if that's the way that we go, then how many will fall by the wayside?
You're being generous, and thanks for your kind words. But there's a lot of factors here. The incendiary here, or the thing that fuels this inequality, is American corporations' fetishization with only recruiting from elite universities. And something encouraging is happening when Tesla and when Google say we're going to create more on-ramps to the greatest wealth generator in the history of mankind, and that is the U.S. corporation, other than just attendance to an elite university. We have to provide opportunity and on-ramps into our economy to the 2/3 of young people who don't end up with a college degree. So a lot of it has to start with corporations, and that is, again, they have to fall back in love with kids that don't necessarily go to elite universities to create demand, to create on-ramps, and take a more European-style approach to vocational programs. Part of the stimulus plan that or the bailout package that Biden has approved includes sort of a social service or a kind of almost like a Peace Corps initiative. But we've got to attack this from all sides. We not only need greater enrollments and greater acceptance rates and lower costs incorporating technology, we also need just greater on-ramps into our economy for non-college grads, because we've had incredible prosperity in this nation for the last 30 years. Unfortunately, it hasn't translated to progress because it's essentially the majority of those spoils have gone to elite school graduates.
So again, just staying with this aspect of the 30-year-old not doing as well as his or her parents were when they were 30, you've given me part of the solution, which is that the corporations need to be sure that they're looking at a whole spectrum of students when they're doing their own hiring. Well, what's the message for parents, and what's the message for the 30-something themselves who will hear or watch this conversation?
Gosh, we're going to need a bigger boat. I think there's just no getting around it. College is still incredibly important. In colleges, we don't really educate, we don't mature, we certify. And colleges have turned into the ultimate HR screening platform where companies are willing to pay a real premium for the certification and the screening that they do in the admissions department. The most valuable part of Harvard in the corporation's eyes is the admissions department, because if they figure out of 54,000 applicants, if they pick 1,400, then Google will pick that person. And the starting salaries for some of these kids at the elite platforms, Google, Goldman Sachs, McKinsey, for kids from the elite of the elite, these kids are making $140,000 to $160,000 at 22 right out of college. We are going to have to figure out a way, again, to just provide more on-ramps. So I would say to parents, it's important that you emphasize that the kid should be thinking about striving for college, but maybe striving for a gap year as well. And also, I don't want to say prepare them to be let down, But it just becomes so difficult to get into an elite university. Building confidence around or aspiration around going to college, even if it's not quote unquote an Ivy League, or exploring other routes or other on-ramps, because it's just so devastating for households across America right now. More and more kids are just getting shut out of this kind of elite cartel, if you will. And then to kids, look, my advice is we live in a capitalist society. Focus on economic security. There's a myth of balance. Get ready to work your ass off if you expect to be in the top 10%, much less the top 1%. And the greatest advice you can give anybody at the age of 30 is be very aggressive around establishing relationships, because the best decision you can make economically is to find the right partner, to find a competent partner to partner with. But these are huge problems, Michael. And you're a father. Any thoughts? You have 4 sons, and by the way, I know a little bit about your sons. Your sons are thriving.
Right, three sons and a daughter. Three sons and a daughter,
and they're thriving.
And I can talk a good philosophical game with Scott Galloway on this subject, but I don't know that I can live to the mantra that might come out of such a conversation. And by that, I mean that in a suburban community like mine, it is very hard not to be completely swept up into
Obsessed.
Everything that you're discussing and describing.
100%.
Scott, our kids would be proficient in a musical instrument, each of them, if they dedicated the time that they had to prepare for the SAT for learning the cello or something. And in the end, was it worth it? I don't know if it was worth it to play the game. And maybe if I and my wife had set a different expectation at the outset, it would have ended differently. I really don't know. The jury is going to be out for a number of years on that.
Yeah, look, it's easy. It's sort of do as I say, not as I do. And that is, we all get caught up. We all want a different path for self-awareness and economic security and happiness for our kids. But we all end up hiring, not all of us, those of us with resources end up studying to the test. And the test is, how do I get my kid into the best school and set him or her up for this pathway, this narrower and narrower pathway to, I don't want to call it guaranteed success, but much greater probability of success. And that is getting your kid the tutors, the test prep, the nudge, the friends, wink, wink, can you help me here? Can you write a letter here? I know a friend. And the problem is, most of us, my mother was a secretary. We didn't have any contacts at UCLA. We didn't have any friends to call the chancellor. But UCLA, the vision and generosity of the Regents of the University of California and California taxpayers said, I didn't get in my first time. I had to apply twice. That's with a 60% acceptance rate. And I remember the exact words of the admissions director. She called me and said, you're not qualified, but you're a native son of California, and we think you might have a great future. How many times can an admissions director call and tell that to an unremarkable kid now? And we have to change. We have to decide what America is. Is America's goal to create more billionaires or more millionaires? Is it a goal to find the next Elon Musk, or is the goal to create more people who have a shot? And unfortunately, I think slowly but surely, universities have morphed from being the greatest upward lubricant of mobility in the history of mankind to the enforcer of our caste system. And we need an entirely different approach. It all starts with corporations and parents saying, our goal as voters, our goal as a citizen is to give the bottom half a shot, not to fetishize the top 1% who have decided or proven they're freakishly remarkable by the age of 17, because the majority of us are not freakishly remarkable. We need to fall back in love with the unremarkables.
I want people to read this lengthy interview that you did with New York Magazine, and of course to listen to your podcasts. But I'll just say in closing that what we've discussed is part of a bigger outlook that you offer in explaining how our society has engaged in a transfer of wealth from the middle class to what you describe as the shareholder class. Will you just big picture that for me in a minute or two?
Sure. In 2008, we had a near catastrophe. So we took $700 billion to prop up the financial institution because we were worried about systemic risk, but we let stocks fall, we let housing prices fall, and that provided opportunity for young people to go on and buy Amazon at 10 times revenues, not 30 times revenues, or to buy Brooklyn real estate at $400 a square foot instead of $1,800 a square foot. Volatility is good for a transfer of wealth and gives young people a shot. With this crisis, we've decided we'll invest $6 trillion to suppress all volatility, flush the market with capital such that the stock market explodes, real estate explodes, and who owns 90% of stocks and real estate by dollar volume? The top 1%. So the shareholder class has decided to basically use the credit card of the unborn and the young to suppress volatility and to explode their own wealth. That results in a dangerous seeking of volatility by young people, whether it's through crypto, whether it's through social movements. But the incendiary that wants volatility, which favors young people, is getting very dangerous here because they will find that volatility. And a shareholder class of mostly boomers wants to suppress volatility and increase shareholder value at the cost of young people, even when they see their opportunities decline. We have lost the script here. If we don't have successful young people, we are going to have a revolution in one form or the other.
I can't thank you enough for coming by to flesh out some of what you said in that interview. I really appreciate it, and I hope that Scott Galloway will come back soon.
Anytime, Michael. Just absolutely can't. And by the way, was really moved by your article and your thoughts on the mass shootings and comparing to the vaccines. I thought that was really powerful. Thanks for what you do.
Thank you. Scott Galloway. Really appreciate him being here.